Hey everyone, and welcome to the Monetize Your Expertise podcast. I'm your host, Grant Weherley, the online course guy helping you every week to monetize your expertise. Just go to myepodcast.com for tools and links and more for all episodes. Hey everyone, and welcome to the Monetize Your Expertise podcast. Today I'm here with Keith Perhac, who's a technical marketer, who's also a developer, who helps product creators sell their products better, and has worked with people like Ramit Sethi, Nomadic Matt, and Eben Pagan. Thanks for joining me today, Keith.
Thanks so much for having me, man.
So you've done a lot of really cool things with regards to products, and I'm curious how you initially got into doing the things that you work on today.
So it was actually one of those kind of gradual things. So for people who don't know, I live in Japan currently, and at the time I was working for a Japanese startup. I was the only foreigner working there, the only non-Japanese person working there. And over time, I became to be in a position at the company where I was not only developing the products, I was also designing them. I was working on marketing, kind of user testing, user case scenarios, like understanding what the customer wanted, and just essentially owning the whole life cycle of the product. And that comes with a lot of responsibility in addition to building and designing, which is things like conversion testing, seeing if people respond to certain things in certain ways, et cetera, et cetera. And this was all very gradual. No one hired me to do this at the outset. It just kind of kept getting lumped onto my plate because we needed to be able to sell better. And so it was really this kind of organic, like teach myself how to do this kind of thing. And this was, 10 years ago at this point. So this was like at the very beginning of when all this A/B testing and kind of conversion optimization was starting.
That's great stuff, and I think there's a lot of value to be had in combining awareness of marketing and also the technical side of things rather than keeping those two things separate, just because I think it's very limiting if you only understand one side or the other.
Definitely. And one of the things that I saw a lot in Japan is that they were very separate, is that managers and marketers stayed in their little world, the technical people stayed in their little world, and there wasn't much interaction. And that's really just, it's such a shame that that's the case, because there is so much that someone who is technical, who also understands marketing, even the basics of it, can provide, because marketing in this day and age, especially with the internet, is all about scale, right? And it's so much easier to scale when you understand the technology behind that scaling rather than just kind of guessing at what's good or copying what other people have done, right?
Absolutely. And I think even if you don't know anything about tech, but you're a marketer, you don't even know what's possible, because you don't even know what is possible with regards to the technology and what can be done if you did know how to do it, or what the tech team can do. So yeah, absolutely. I definitely see the value in that. And then one thing I've written down here is that, was that company owned by the guy who started or brought the internet to Japan?
Yeah, so this was actually we got bought by him early on. And so I had joined right before we got purchased the first time. And so there was this group called ASCII in Japan, and they were the ones back in, I believe, the late 80s. I'm unsure of the timeline, when they were like, okay, now we need to bring the internet to Japan. Let's get this working, bring it into all the universities and everything. So I think it was a group of 12 people, and he was one of the people on that committee. And now he does so much with fundraising and contributions to technology and colleges and stuff like that. But he purchased our company about 2 years after I had joined. And so I was working with them for about 4 years, and then we got sold to a subsidiary of Toyota. So that was that company's kind of lifeline.
Cool. So how did you move on from that project to working for yourself, starting your own companies, helping people through your agency, through your SaaS products? How did you move into that?
So same thing. It was very organic. So at that point in the company, we were about to be acquired, and I took the decision of, hey, I'm doing pretty much everything for this company at this point. I'm designing, marketing, doing conversion rate optimization, building products, etc. I don't really like working until 11 p.m. every night and never seeing my kids. And if I went to Toyota, it would be even worse at that point, right? So I kind of felt, well, this is a tipping point, right? Like, I have the choice. I can go along with the acqui-hire. I can go work at Toyota, and I can work myself to the bone again, or I can try it out for myself, and maybe I'll succeed, maybe I'll fail, but at least I've tried it, right? So I'm good friends with Patrick McKenzie. He actually lived next door to me for quite some time, but he continuously was prodding me for many years to quit my job. So I finally took the leap, and he introduced me to my first client, which was Ramit Sethi. So I quit. I continued doing work for Japanese companies and started working for Ramit doing front-end conversion rate optimization and development stuff.
I must say that's a really, really good situation and really awesome first client to have when you first start working for yourself.
Right?
I can see why you say it was organic, and that's amazing.
Although it was really interesting that back then, I mean, this was 5 years ago, very few people knew who he was back then. I mean, he was big and he was very popular, but like I would tell people, oh yeah, I work for Ramit Sethi, and they were like, I don't know who that is. Now I say, I work for Ramit Sethi, or I worked for Ramit Sethi, and they're like, oh, we all know who that is. And it was funny. I went to a networking event in Japan, and I was talking to someone, and I was like, oh yeah, I help internet marketers, and I don't really say a lot of my client names a lot. And he's like, oh yeah, by the way, do you know this guy Ramit Sethi? I just bought like 6 of his products. I'm like, you're this random guy in Japan, and like, how did it just boggled my mind, right? So it's amazing how much he has grown, and it's been a lot of work on Ramit's end, and he's just killing it right now, to be honest.
Yeah,
right?
And it shows that both you and he did a really good job.
Well, I don't know how much credit I can take on that, but yeah.
Well, you can at least take a bit. I mean, especially if you started with him early on. So yeah, and so you've worked with some really, really awesome people and big names. And I'm curious, so the other people whose names would probably be recognized by most people nowadays, did you start working with all of them sort of pre-famous, or did you kind of move up to pre-famous, from pre-famous to like actually currently famous people? Or
I really don't know. I don't know when someone is famous or not, because once you start working in that circle, like everyone knows them, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of my clients, they kind of run the gamut. I have a lot of smaller clients. I have a lot of small clients who have gotten really big, and I have a lot of big clients who I've started out with later in their career, right? Mm-hmm. So it really runs the gamut. And I like working best with people who have small teams. So I've worked, I did a lot of work with Toyota, a lot of enterprise style work where we have 40 people in a meeting from 6 different companies, all trying to accomplish a single goal. And it's really tough.
That sounds terrible.
It's absolutely horrible. Like, if you want to know the quickest way to waste a ton of money, you just need to go into enterprise sales, right? Like, we made an iPad app that cost over $1 million to produce.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was an interesting project, only because it was very interesting to be involved in the process. Mm-hmm. But afterwards, it's like, with the amount of quality and content here, like one guy could have made this in probably 2 months.
So do you still work with those type of clients nowadays, or have you moved away from that because it's such a pain in the ass?
I've mainly moved away from it. I mean, one of the nice things about having grown the company and being in the position that I am is that I can be more selective of my clients. And so it's really just a lot of headache and heartache to be working on these huge enterprise style deals and stuff. So I've tried to stay away from that as much as humanly possible and work with smaller companies, generally around the 5 to 10, maybe up to 20 people range, that are really trying to do something cool, right? And what I've seen is once you get above 20 people, there's this problem where the bandwidth of communication takes over from productivity, right? When you're still at 5 to 10 people, like, you all huddle around, you're like, this is what we're going to accomplish. And everyone's like, go, yeah. And they're like, it's easy to talk to people. No one is managing on high, right? So there's very little delegation, right? There's a lot of, hey, you and I are going to come in here and do this together. Or, hey, we got to get this email funnel set up. I don't know how to do this. Let's jump into it together, kind of thing, right? Like, it's a lot of camaraderie in production. And when you get higher than that 20, what you have is managers and people talking to each other and then putting things off in their own priorities. And it gets, and I'm not saying that that's bad, it just slows things down a lot, right? And I don't see it as effective and as interesting as the type of work I like to do, which is work with the client very closely, jump in, bang out something really amazing, iterate quickly, improve things, and start getting real results in very short amount of time, right?
Mm-hmm. And in terms of your sort of ideal client checklist, is that the number one criteria, which is the size of the team and the style of work you'll have with them?
It's not the number one criteria, but it's pretty high. Mainly my number one criteria is just to be interested in the work they're doing. If it's someone who wants to stand up WordPress pages, I'm generally just like, I'll introduce you to some really amazing people who are really good at that, but that's not what we do, right? What we want to do is be able to build stuff for you, build funnels, build optimizations that can really drive your business. But if you're interested in just having someone listen to you and build static websites for you, then there's a lot of cheaper and probably more interested parties that I can introduce you to.
So I think I'm curious to know what percentage of people do you have to screen out like that they're just a horrible fit for what you do and what they need? What percentage of people like come to you that you have to turn away?
It used to be much higher. And what I've been doing recently is I've turned into so most of my clients are from referrals. So it means that some client that I've worked with is really happy with the work we've done. Someone they know and respect has a similar problem. And they're like, you should totally talk to Keith. And that's how I've been getting a lot of my work recently. So that means that they've been kind of pre-approved, right? So they're people who are at the same level as my current clients, or they're just good people, they're interesting people, because otherwise my clients wouldn't want to be with them, and they wouldn't want to recommend them to me, because they know if I'm working with them, with my current client and this new client, that my time is, of course, going to be divided between them. And they don't want me to be working on something horrible that's depressing and is just going to suck all the energy out of me, because I'm going to be worse when I'm working with them, right? So, and it's the same way when I recommend people to work with them. I want to recommend people that make me look good, right? I want to recommend people that really help out the client or whoever I'm recommending them to, right? I want them to just knock it out of the park and be awesome. I get the same when people are referring clients to me. So, I mean, to answer your question, I used to get a lot of clients that I'd have to turn down, or that I'd try working with and just didn't work out, right? And doing the referral thing, I don't think I've turned down a client in a little while, at least not for the reasons of, hey, you're not interesting to work with, or you're too big, or whatever, right?
Is there anything that you do to encourage those referrals, or is it purely based on the fact that you just do a really damn good job?
I used to do like the whole Steli FD thing where you email out and you're like, hey, do you have once you close a new deal, hey, do you have any new referrals, etc.? Can you introduce me to anyone? Recently, though, I've had much more work than I can deal with. So it's been less of that and more of just natural referrals, where because I do a good job and people like working with me, when someone comes to them with a problem, they're like, oh, you should totally check out Keith. It was funny. Someone referred to me as the secret behind the biggest companies that you've never heard of. So
that's awesome. Well, I'm happy to be able to talk to that secret sauce that people use. So I know you don't just do consulting stuff. I know you've also got Summit Evergreen and Segmetrics. So I'm curious, how do you split your time, and what's the biggest element in your business between those three things?
Man, I split my time poorly. That's the answer to that.
That's honest answer.
So there's pretty much three parts to the business. One is the consulting, which is really the largest part at this point, just as terms of revenue and time commitment. And then Segmetrics and Summit Evergreen are two SaaS products that we built that focus very specifically on the target market that we do for our consulting as well. So Summit Evergreen, and both of them have co-founders. So it's not just me, because if it was just me doing these two SaaS products and consulting, I'd kill myself. Like, it would just, there's no way I could manage that. But I have co-founders and they're both amazing people. And that's why we're able to do this. But Summit Evergreen is online courseware. So it's for people who want to create online courses and teach things. It's kind of like a cross between Udemy and Wishlist Member and something like that. It's for information product people, product creators. And that kind of came out of this need that we were seeing where everyone was asking us to build courseware. And they were like, there's nothing out there. We need to build some courseware. Can you build it for us? And after the third time of people asking that, it's kind of like, well, obviously there's nothing out there. Everyone's building it, spending a lot of money to build it themselves. Why don't we just build something and turn it into a SaaS, right? So that's where that came out of. And then the second one is Segmetrics, which actually my co-founder came to me, and I'd been friends with him forever, working at a lot of clients. And there's this CRM marketing platform called Infusionsoft right now. It's one of the biggest in the internet marketing space. And the reporting on it is horrible. absolutely horrible. It's impossible to get any good data. You have to export it all to Excel. And this is what all the internet marketers have been doing for years as they're trying to get data out of the system. And my co-founder came to me, and he's a internet market analyst, so he's in Infusionsoft doing these Excel pivot tables and everything. He says, Keith, if I do one more of these Excel pivot tables, I'm going to just rip out what remaining hair I have. And he's like, we have to do something. And that was kind of the birth of Segmetrics. And it was interesting because we just started that a couple months ago, and we tried to do something new, which was do it as a very, very thin minimum viable product, so an MVP. And we started out and we coded the first version in, I think it was 40 hours. And at the end of 40 hours, we had a beta version, and we showed a bunch of our clients, and we gauged their reaction. I was like, are you interested in this? Are you not interested in this? And they were pretty much interested in it, but they were like, but we totally don't want the data like this. We want it like this. So we've had to iterate. We've put about 1,500 hours into it so far. But each time we were going back to our clients, people with real problems, and saying, is this what you want? Is this the data that you want? Is this the data that's going to build, to grow the business, right? And so it was a really interesting and iterative process that we were able to build this product specifically to fit the market that we were targeting. And based on that, we've actually started working with a lot of clients and product people to create their own minimal viable products for ideas that they have, where, usually what you do is you hire a development company and you pay them, $50,000 to $80,000 to build a first version that maybe people want, maybe they don't want, right? And so we really created this process where it's like this very kind of sophisticated back and forth with the stakeholders and the clients on how to build something that people actually want in a limited amount of time with a limited amount of funds, right?
That's really amazing, and I'm curious a couple of things. One, I actually, when I was doing my due diligence for this interview, I came across the Segmetrics, and I laughed really hard because I was literally just talking to a friend and a guy in my mastermind last month. We were talking about how somebody should start a SaaS for Infusionsoft to help with specific elements of it, because everybody bitches about it, but there aren't a lot of good services and products and SaaS products to really support that. So I think it's amazing that you're working on that. And I think, I imagine your business will explode because it's such a huge need. And I'm curious if that process was different for Segmetrics versus Summit Evergreen, because you mentioned a lot of iteration with Segmetrics.
Very different.
But yeah, how does that compare with Summit Evergreen?
Yeah, so Summit Evergreen, and I think the development process of Segmetrics really grew out of Summit Evergreen, because if we hadn't had the Summit Evergreen development experience, we would not have done Segmetrics in the same way. And so I think of it as a much more kind of mature development process. So Summit Evergreen was much more of the build it and then figure it out kind of thing. So we, like I had said, we had a lot of experience building these systems before. And so we thought, oh yeah, we have a lot of experience. We know what people want, so let's build it. And it was a lot of features at first. We fell into the whole got to have all these features or no one will buy it camp, which is very dangerous. And we spent a lot of money, a lot of time getting it ready. I think we were in development for like 8 months, maybe almost a year. And then we were in beta, and the growth was very slow at first. And it was slow for a number of reasons. But one of the reasons that it was difficult for us was as we got new customers on the platform, we noticed that not everyone did products like our clients had, right? And in fact, a majority of people did not. And so we had to make huge changes to the code base and change parts of it that we thought were, of course, everyone's going to do it like this, but they turned out they didn't. So there were a lot of things that we had built first, and then we found out later that we had to change. And that was it was a really good learning experience. It was also a very painful learning experience just because of time and effort. And right now, I mean, we're doing very well with Summit Evergreen right now. It's growing at a very good clip, but it was a very hard first 6 months, year there because we had made assumptions without fully testing them. We had tested them within our small circle, but not wider than that, right? And the tests we had done, or sorry, not the tests we had done, we had built in so many features at the beginning because we thought, oh, if it doesn't have this extra feature, no one's going to buy it, that we were kind of stuck as we wanted to grow more, right?
If you knew what you know now, would you go back and start Summit Evergreen like you have with Segmetrics?
Totally. Oh, yeah. I mean, the base of Summit Evergreen, we could have gotten it out in like 2 months. There was no reason for it to have taken as long as it did, but we wanted to do it right. And I remember sitting down as we were starting the project and planning it out and talking about doing it right. Like I was so excited because this would be one of the first projects where we had the time, we had the expertise, and we could do it all right. And that was the biggest mistake we made. There's just never a right with that kind of thing, right? And that, I think, was the biggest failing. And that's what we did with Segmetrics, is that we didn't say what's right. So the absolute first version of Segmetrics, I finished in 3 or 5 hours, something like that.
Wow.
And all it
was
was a text dump. It was just a text. So I integrated with one of our clients' systems. I did a text dump, and I said, "Hey, if you had these metrics, like, would that be cool?" And he's like, "Yeah, that'd be awesome." So we showed it to him. We showed it to a bunch of other people. We just kind of posted it around, and we were like, "Okay, I think we're onto something." And then we went to the next version, and the next version, and each version, we didn't have a ton of features. And it's good that we didn't, because one of our major assumptions was completely wrong at the beginning. And so we had to delete all that code and start over. But can you imagine if we spent 8 months and had all these things that depended on it, like being able to rip that out? We wouldn't be able to. So it was so much better for us to start small and to just build on it incrementally. And now we have a bunch of features now, but each of them are built on a very simple foundation. At any point, if someone says, "Hey, can you do this?" we could rip out something and put something else in, right? And that's what I learned doing Summit Evergreen, was that you can't just jump whole hog in. It's like the Field of Dreams things. You can't just build it and say, "Yeah, now it has all the features. Everyone's going to come and love it," because they never do, right? You have to go one step at a time each time, bringing people in, getting feedback, iterating, and that's what's really going to help you grow the product and to make a successful product.
Yeah, that's a huge difference. 3 hours versus 8 months. I think it's a
right?
really big lesson learned. And it's crazy to me, because I think what exactly your experience was, that's one of the most common problems that people run into, but also one of the most common talked about things, like the whole lean startup, MVP, interview your customers, things like that. Like, everybody knows that, but everybody still runs into this problem. I do. I know all kinds of business associates do the same thing. And so it's so fascinating to me that we all fall into this trap that we already know about, but we still end up doing it anyways.
And that's why you really need someone who's separate from the project to be giving you advice on it. And that's what we're trying to do right now with a lot of our clients who are looking to start products, and kind of coach them on what is actually necessary and what isn't for their market. Because it's so easy when you're inside it to get those blinders on, right? And say, of course I need surveys and people to be able to fill in their own questions and attach images and like do all this stuff. We have features in Summit Evergreen that no one has, literally no one has ever touched. Because we thought it was so important for it to be there, and no one cares. No one cares. And when that's what you need to launch, because when you're looking to launch and you're like, "Oh, it has to have this feature," and there's always just one more feature that you have to do before you launch, and it's just a mistake. It's just an absolute mistake. You need to get that out there as soon as possible. Even before you write any code, get something out there. See if people are interested. Like, there's so much you can do with so little nowadays, right?
Absolutely. And that perfectionist tendencies can be just a crazy killer in terms of like, "Oh, I know, I've done this before. I know exactly how it should be and what they'll want, and and it should look like this." But then, that ends up impeding and making you take 8 months instead of 3 hours. So
yep,
yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely. Was there any major assumptions that you made that you found really interesting because they were totally wildly incorrect?
So one that we learned was Segmetrics, which was interesting. Originally, how we had it was essentially you'd set up a report. So we assumed that people understood their data, they understood their business enough that you could say, "Okay, I want to find everyone who let's say, signed up for this ebook and then purchased my product." And then you'd click start, and it would do its little churning thing, and then it would give you a report. And we were like, this is very useful. And it was very useful if you knew exactly what you were looking for. But what we found out very quickly is that no one knew exactly what they were looking for. They wanted something like Google Analytics, where you could jump in and just start clicking around and finding things, right? And that was how people were getting valuable insight. Because if you know what you're looking for at the beginning, it's very easy to get that number anyways, so it's not helpful. What you want to look for is numbers that you had no idea even existed. So we had to change the entire setup to be more like Google Analytics, instead of like define everything and then press go, in real time it has to say, okay, well, what about people who bought this? What did they do? Or what happened a week before? And be able to change all this data in real time so you can explore the data rather than just reporting on it. And that was the biggest, I won't say mistake, but kind of misstep that we made, was assuming that people wanted a report, and they don't. They want to be able to explore their users and their information.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I'm curious, do you see yourself as building up like exactly what Infusionsoft users need and then eventually being acquired by Infusionsoft?
No, we actually have bigger goals than that. I mean, if Infusionsoft tried to acquire us, hey, that'd be cool. I don't know if that would happen or not. I don't think that they've acquired anyone yet, but I'm not sure. But end goal for us, I think, is to be like Segment.io, which is now segment.com, which is to take all the information that you have for your marketing, for your business, and not only collect it, but also give you actionable information about it. Right, so that's kind of our end game, I think, is that in the future we want to not only do Infusionsoft, but also, let's say your sales data is in Stripe and you have people in MailChimp and you have a customer system or something like that, right? And be able to pull in all that data. And the reason we're starting with Infusionsoft is, first, we have a lot of experience there. A lot of our clients are there. They have a big user base and they have a very rabid user base, right? And it's a great way to find people who are at really the forefront of internet marketing and who need this information in order to do their jobs correctly.
Absolutely. That makes so much sense. And I'm curious about one thing. I'm always fascinated by people who have multiple businesses or multiple sides of the same general type of business. So between your consultancy, your two SaaS products, how do you actually connect those three businesses, or do you at all? Do you send people from your consultancy to Summit Evergreen? Do you have people from Summit Evergreen using Segmetrics, or are they all three separate?
Each of the SaaS products are built with a co-founder, and the way we're doing it is that the co-founder has their own business, and they put people to work on their side of it, and then we, from the consulting side, put people to work on it, both for Segmetrics and Summit Evergreen. And at this point, we generally have a lot of client work, and then we kind of divvy it up throughout the week. So we say, okay, we have a lull in some client work, we have some downtime, and we need these things built on Segmetrics, or we have an urgent issue in Summit. So we really treat Summit and Segmetrics almost like another client, right? And that way we're able to kind of balance that load with everyone else as well. And we can also scale up and scale down. Let's say we have two clients who are in launch mode and we need a lot of time there, but we also have things in Summit Evergreen. We can schedule for that in advance and work that all out. It's one of those like keeping multiple plates spinning thing, and at any second it could probably fall down, but it hasn't yet.
That's good. Hopefully it stays that way. I haven't heard of anybody else using that particular setup, but that's really interesting. Hopefully that continues to work for you, because I know it can be quite a challenge, especially when you got multiple really exciting things going on at the same time. I know even with one major project, there's multiple elements of a single given project that sometimes it's hard to keep those plates spinning, let alone the bigger overarching plates on top of those plates spinning as well. So that's been great that you've been able to do that. But we've talked about some of your major successes, some great people that you've worked with. You know, you've worked with some really big names, and you've even worked for a business that was acquired by the guy who brought the internet to Japan. That's just a great little tagline, by the way. But so you've done some really amazing things, but I'm sure, as you kind of alluded to before, it's not always major successes in your business. A lot of times you learn from failures, and one that you sort of alluded to was the assumptions that you made with Summit Evergreen. But I'm curious about a time that was a huge low for you personally or in your business, and what you learned from that in order to achieve later success. So when was a time that you felt like a failure in your business?
So that's an interesting question. I mainly only feel like a failure in my business when I'm not able to give all my clients the kind of love and attention that they deserve, right? And when I'm not responsive enough, and maybe I am to them, but I don't feel like I'm being responsive enough or giving the amount of attention I should. I'm trying to think. It's interesting that you mentioned that, because I think now, especially, I'm looking at this move to the United States. So we just flew out here, the whole family, And the business structure is so different here because I'm used to sitting at my computer 10 hours a day working, right? And when I come here, there's many more meetings, there's much more kind of face-to-face time and stuff like that, which has really changed the way that I need to run the business. So it's interesting because right now, I think I'm feeling like the biggest failure in my company.
Really?
Yeah, so you kind of hit me at my low, maybe.
But it sounds like you've done so many cool things. Why do you feel like a failure now?
I won't say I don't feel like a failure. I feel like I am letting down some of my clients. I think I'm at that tipping point. I guess I'm at the low in my business right now. And that's because, with me moving, I have less time to spend hands on keyboard and more time talking with people and more, but it's not getting as many things done as I'm used to.
Oh, I
right?
see.
So I'm used to being very productive. Lots of client emails me, they say, hey, I need this done. It's done the next day kind of thing, right? And for example, yesterday, Monday and Tuesday, I went to LA to go meet with clients and have consulting sessions, right? Which I can't do when I'm in Japan. I mean, that's a week-long trip right there. But I just took 2 days. I flew down and I came back and it was great and it's very productive. But I didn't have hands on keyboards. I need to put out a landing page, but wasn't able to, right? So that's where I feel like I'm falling down, is that the business kind of balance for me is shifting and I haven't been able to adjust to it yet, right? And so now I have things that I'm behind on, which makes me feel like I'm letting my customers down or my clients down, and that makes me feel like a failure, right? So that's the biggest part that makes me feel like a failure. As far as the company goes and like what I'm doing, I think we're doing well and we're on track. It's more personal stuff. I don't like letting people down. I like helping people and I like building things and I like making people's lives and businesses better. And when I drop that is when I feel responsible, right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And honestly, it's probably a really good trait to have, to actually feel bad when you don't do a great job. It's probably one of the major things that's led to your success, is doing a great job and feeling compelled to.
Yeah.
But that actually sort of leads to the question, which is, it sounds like you still do a lot of the sort of manual work yourself. And how do you balance that between the work you do and then also overseeing your business? So how much do you work in your business versus at a higher level on top of your business, if that makes sense?
And that's the interesting thing. So now that I've come here, there's a lot more working on the business rather than in the business, right? And that's the shift I'm having to make, where when I'm in Japan, I have longer hours because there's no one to go see, right? So my on the business work is about a third of the time and the in the business is 2/3 of the time, just because of the nature of the beast, right? But when I'm here, the in the business time rather gets dropped dramatically. So I need to figure out how to build those processes that I didn't have before. I didn't need them before because I had extra time in order for me to be in the business, but now I don't, because my on the business time has grown to 2/3, but I still have the same amount of workload for the in the business, the hands on keyboard, I like to call it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm at this point where it's kind of like this light coming on for me where, okay, I needed to have these processes built a while ago, and I have good processes now for some things, but not everything, right? And so I need to make them even better so that I can deal with this change in the company.
Sounds like growing pains. Sounds like a challenge which will help facilitate getting to the next level, to where you're not required to sit down on your keyboard for 10 hours a day. But what you're saying definitely resonates with me, and I think a lot of people listening today, because it can, if you're used to sort of grinding out 10 hours of work, and then all of a sudden you're focused on like higher level stuff and having calls and meetings and doing all this planning, but you're not really grinding out work, it can feel like you're not really doing anything. And I think that's a common challenge people have.
It does. And my wife chides me constantly for this. I'm like, man, I was in meetings for 10 hours today. I got nothing done. She's like, you're in meetings for 10 hours. That's getting things done. And it's like,
absolutely,
they're very important for, I would say they're probably the most important for getting the business on track and the business growing and moving in the right direction. But for someone who's very kind of results and I guess object oriented, I don't know if that's the right word, like getting an actual physical result or an actual page that I can say, I built this today, right? Like, it's a very, very different mindset.
Absolutely. And it's just feels qualitatively very different. And it's also kind of difficult because, we hear a lot, I think, nowadays about how meetings are a waste of time and how much wasted time there is on that kind of more corporate type stuff. So I think maybe it even more so leads a bad taste in your mouth if that's all you're doing. 'Cause then you're just like, oh no, but I had 10 hours of meetings today and meetings are bad. Therefore I didn't get anything done. But at the end of the day, you're right. And your wife is right. You have to do that, especially if you're trying to get things to the next level, because if you're sitting there grinding things out, then you can't step away to get things to the next level. But I think it's psychologically a very difficult lesson to learn sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
So it sounds like you have learned, and of course, we're always continuing to learn. So you're continuing to learn new lessons, which is awesome. It's part of the fun, I think, of business. But given all that you've learned so far, I'd be fascinated to hear what you would have to say either to your past self or maybe to somebody currently who's kind of getting started along a similar path and they don't have a lot of experience or maybe quite as refined skill sets. But what kind of lessons learned would you like to share with people?
Wow, the biggest one is to start small. Like, definitely, that's the mistake I've made a number of times. Always start at the smallest point you can. That's the most effective. So what that means is if you're planning on creating a product, whether it's a SaaS product or an info product or something, start with the landing page. See if people are interested in it. Don't write the whole book and then see if people are interested, right? And I've seen that time and time again, both with myself and clients, where it's like, oh, I have to build the thing first and then sell it. And that's just not how it works anymore. It's like you need to find if people are interested. It's so easy and so cheap to find if people are interested before you actually start building anything, right? The second one I would say is learn how to say no. And this is something I still have trouble with, is that I like helping people. I like making people happy and making them successful. And I have trouble turning away clients even if I'm too busy, right? Because like I said, the referrals I come, they're great people. I'm really interested in what they're doing. I really want to help them. And sometimes that gets me in trouble. And I've heard and learned and am still trying to learn that saying no is very, very important to being able to focus on what you want to do, especially if what you want to do doesn't involve working 18-hour days all the time.
Good lesson to learn. Yeah, actually, I totally agree with everything you're saying. Actually, I was just a guest on another podcast last night, and that's one of the things that they asked me as well. And I had a similar answer. They were asking me specifically with regards to online courses, because that's what I spend a lot of time doing, is helping people actually build and launch their course, and also doing that for myself. And we were kind of talking about that. People do the same kind of thing with information products as well, as they're just like, oh, I know about this topic. I really, really want to make this product on this topic. And then they just make it and they push it out there, and then it sits there, and they realize then that it maybe was a totally wrong topic, or at least it was the wrong angle for the topic, because they never actually talk to people about it. And that's a huge, like we were saying before, it's such a common problem in like every type of product in every industry. So basically, if you guys are listening today, go read the Lean Startup and then actually do it, and then read it again, and then actually make sure you follow through with it, because we've all been exposed to that methodology, but even experienced entrepreneurs always fall into this trap. And I'm still really fascinated about why that is, about how we can get caught up in something that we intellectually know, but we still end up doing the wrong thing. It's just a really interesting thing.
I think because, for me personally, I think this is similar for a lot of people. We like building, we like creating something new, right? And it's much more fun to create something. And it's also kind of narcissistic, right? You want to create something that you think is amazing. You're interested in the creation process. And then you're like, of course I like it. Everyone else will like it. But it's so much easier. I mean, it's a mental hurdle. It's mentally very difficult to start at the other end and say, hey, this is what I'm doing. Anyone interested? But it's such a quicker and more effective way of going about it, right?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think it is a lot more fun to actually build cool things rather than put yourself out there and expose yourself vulnerable way with your idea, with what you're trying to create before you've even created it. Because people are just like, it's such a hard thing to do sometimes, is to put yourself out there, put what you're working on out there in front of people, even if you've already got it, let alone before you've created it. So yeah, absolutely. I think that makes a lot of sense to me as well.
I kind of think of it like as a Kickstarter, where you don't get money up front, right? And you can get money up front, but think about it like your own personal Kickstarter. Like the Kickstarters, generally the product, I mean, almost always the product is not made yet, right? And they're trying to judge interest. And if there's enough interest, then they'll go ahead and make the product. And you can do the same thing. You can do a webinar. You can say, hey, I'm going to be talking about this awesome thing on this webinar. Why don't you come join me? And if you get 2 people to come, maybe you shouldn't be talking about that, or your positioning is off, or no one's interested. But if you get 100 people on it, then hey, maybe you're onto something. And one thing that's really cool, especially with info products, so this is very specific. No, I think this goes to SaaS products as well, is that when you're communicating with people, you can ask them, hey, what's your biggest problem that you're having, right? And they're going to tell you because they want the solution. And then you take that and you make that part of your product. So if you're doing an info product and you're like, okay, let's talk about how to do sales funnels in Infusionsoft. And we say, hey, everyone who came to this webinar, what's the most difficult thing about creating a sales funnel in Infusionsoft? And everyone will give you all the answers. And then you have market research. You have 100 people or maybe 500 people telling you exactly what they want to hear. And you're like, oh, that'd be a great chapter for the book, right? And it's the same with the SaaS product. When people are engaged and people are looking for the solution to the problem, they're going to tell you what they want to know. And that's a great way to find out what you should be writing, not just writing it in a vacuum and just sticking it out there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You bring up a lot of really great points. And I think maybe some people would have the objection that like, oh, well, I don't really have a clear audience yet. I don't have a massive email list to mail out to or a bunch of personal connections that I could easily talk with. But also, I just want to bring up that that should not be a barrier either. I remember using that as an excuse in the past, which is why I want to speak to that. But there's ways to really easily find that audience to, scrape your own personal contacts or, just like there's ways to quickly, easily build email lists of people that are very relevant to just about any industry and just contact them, be like, hey, I want to talk with you. I want to help you in a really ethical and helpful and positive way. So that shouldn't also be a barrier, even if you're just getting started and you're kind of new and you don't have an audience already established.
Exactly.
But now I want
to say one extra thing on that, which is if you can't get people to come to a webinar, you're not going to be able to sell your product, right? Like if you're worried because you don't have an audience to come to a webinar, you're going to have the same problem when you try to sell it, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. And so actually there's 2 variables there, which is one, your topic might be bad or your positioning kind of, as you mentioned, or maybe you're just not that great at marketing and you should probably work on those skills because they're relevant for webinars as also with products. So
Exactly.
Man, this has been such a fascinating conversation. I've really enjoyed chatting with you about all these different topics, all the cool things that you're working on. And I'd like to sort of move towards the sort of wrap-up section where I have a series of quick questions that I'd love to throw at you and just hear your quick response about your skill sets and what you've got coming up for you. Sound good?
All right, let's try it.
So what is something that you're really good at and actually better than most people?
It's interesting. I just got asked this a couple days ago. And what I'm good at is seeing a problem and working backwards. So essentially seeing the problem, seeing the solution to that problem, and then working backwards from the solution to understand how we achieve that, right? I thought this was perfectly normal that everyone does this, and apparently they don't. Everyone starts at the beginning and they try to figure out how to get to the solution. And apparently this is rare that I can see the beginning, the end, and all the steps to get there. And it just fits and locks in my mind.
That sounds insanely useful. How do you leverage that in your business? Is it something that it's on a business level or a project level or both?
Both. So pretty much, like sometimes I won't know like the detailed steps of. So let's take, for example, for technology, I'll understand what we need to do, the best way to kind of set up the structure of everything. Maybe I don't know the commands we need to put in, or if we're going to use NoSQL or MongoDB or CouchDB. I don't know it at that level, but I can understand this is what we have. This is the solution we need to come about. What is the fastest, simplest, and most effective way to accomplish that? So that if we do need to change it later, we can. And where it really is really useful is in sales funnels, because sales funnels are the ultimate start position and end position kind of problem, right? The start position is how do people start on my list, or they give me their email address, and the end position is buying a product, right? But what gets them there? What is the best way to get them? What type of offers can we give them? Most people, they start at the beginning and they're like, oh, I'll send them this email, this email, this email. And suddenly they're off on this crazy tangent, right? But if you start at the end, you're like, this is the main goal. Let's work backwards from there, how to get there. And it just all clicks to me. And that's kind of, I would say that's my superpower.
It's a good one for sure. And you know what kind of analogy this brings to mind is actually chess. You even use the terms end position and start position, and then also reverse engineering from, okay, I want to put this guy in a checkmate. How do I work backwards and get there? That's really, really interesting how there's a parallel there.
Yeah.
But let's move on from your superpower to your kryptonite. So what's something that you're really bad at, much worse than most people?
Process. Repeatable process. I hate repetition more than anything. And I would rather build a new solution than do something I've done 4 times. And so I'm very bad at creating repeatable processes. And that's something that I'm struggling with right now, is trying to build the business in a way that I can have repeatable processes so I can get the information out of my head, the strategy, and then be able to have other people implement it more easily than I do now. So less hands on keyboard and more repeatable processes that are effective.
And it's actually the building of the process that's a weakness for you, as opposed to fulfilling and executing on that process?
No, it's the fulfilling. The building I can do, it's the fulfilling that's horrible. I build out to-do lists and schedules and checklists for myself, and I'll do them once and then I'll skip them. It's like I've actually watched myself go down a checklist, and I'll do 1, 2, I'll skip this 4, skip these 8, and then I'll go back up to the top and start it again. It's horrible. I can't do it. I don't know why.
Well, I think actually it's a common problem. It's like, oh, well, number 7's a lot more interesting than number 2, so let's just go there, and then
Exactly.
we'll come back to the boring ones later.
Exactly. This will take me 20 minutes to answer. I'll do this one later.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I fall into the same trap as well, and I think a lot of people do. But actually, it's of the two, struggling to build processes versus execute process. I think struggling to execute processes is a much smaller problem than struggling to build them, because you can always hire somebody in many cases to actually execute a process. So
It is, but then there's also the problem that it's like, okay, I can hire someone to do the process, but it's so much easier for me to do it, right? And I fall into that trap. So it's understanding how to build the process and then actually building it for other people. I think it's a very different skill.
Absolutely.
Either that or I'm just very lazy.
No, it sounds like you're working on a lot. I definitely wouldn't call you lazy, but yeah, that little business demon on your shoulder that's like, oh, don't delegate this, don't hire. You can do it. It'll take 5 minutes. It's not that big of a deal. It's like a little business snake that's like tempting. It's like, oh, this will be fine. I'll just do it myself. It's not that big of a deal.
Exactly.
And so one final question for this segment. What is something that you're most excited about right now that's coming up for you?
Honestly, the move to the US, if it happens. I mean, we're still on the fence, but it's going to be really big if I do it, because I'll finally be able to be in a community of people who understand what I do. And like the idea of being able to get on a $100 flight, fly down to LA, meet some clients and fly back is like magic to me. Like after 13 years of being in Japan, that's just magic.
Yeah, I totally feel you there, being in Thailand myself. And so you're going to be moving, or you're looking at moving to Portland, you said?
Portland and then Colorado. So we have 2 there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's really interesting. And I wonder if, in your mind, if you would actually prefer to live in either Portland or Japan, and maybe is the move for a lifestyle reason or for purely a business reason to be able to have easy access to clients?
No, it's mainly lifestyle. It's mainly lifestyle for my family and the kids, and the business side of it, of course, is a huge benefit, but it's not the main reason.
Nice. Well, it's awesome that it hits both of those areas at once in the same direction. So
yeah. So, well, not sure if it's going to happen yet. I'm probably jinxing it by even talking about it, but at the same time, it's one of the big things that's happening right now, and it's what I'm most excited about. And I'm product-wise, Segmetrics is the new thing I'm working on. So it's always exciting to be on a new product, especially when it's growing really quickly at the beginning. You get like really excited about how the future is going to go with it. So
yeah, good stuff. Very good stuff. And so I've really enjoyed this conversation. And I know you've got multiple websites going on. So if people are interested, they can go to keithperhac.com, summitevergreen.com, and also segmetrics.io. But where's the main place people should check out what you're working on?
Yeah, if you want to check what I'm working on, keithperhac.com. I put up all the podcasts, all the products I'm working on, just whatever comes up, and also working on a lot of Infusionsoft specific content for things like how to build funnels and sales strategies and stuff. But as always, it's slow coming. So
Yeah, no worries, no worries. But yeah, man, I really appreciate you coming on today. I think this has been a fascinating conversation, not only for people listening, but for me as well. Sounds like you're an awesome guy. You're doing lots of great stuff.
Thank you.
So thanks again for joining me today.
No, I've had a great time, and really you've made me think about some other things about myself and the company that I really don't take the time to think about too much. So it's been great.
Good stuff. It's the service of an interviewer, right? Just like posing those questions and then letting you answer them. So
Exactly. Thank you so much.
Thanks again.
Hey entrepreneurs and experts, I just wanted to thank you for listening to this episode, and I hope you learned at least one new big idea that helps you evolve your skills and gets you closer to monetizing your expertise and creating that successful knowledge business. Make sure to hit that subscribe button on iTunes and Stitcher, and check out myepodcast.com for all episodes as well as the tips and tricks mentioned in this episode. Thanks again, and I'll see you next week.